Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Christopher Hampson. I am the college's admissions officer, and I will be helping you through this session together with a couple of colleagues. I'll just do introductions and a few points of housekeeping while we wait for the last few people to join the session. So as I say, I'm the admissions officer. There's a little information about me there, and if you can't see my live video features, there's a picture of me as well. As the admissions officer, I'm involved with the complete range of admissions work, so I'm fairly familiar with all of this, not simply as a function of having been at Kellogg for quite a long time now. And so I'm hoping that I will be able to run through the financial declaration process, the information about it that you need fairly clearly and comprehensively. The plan for today's session is that this is intended to answer questions for those applicants who have to provide a financial declaration to the college and specifically to Kellogg College. If by some weird chance you are not an applicant who has to provide the college with a financial declaration, or somehow you are an applicant from another college that has wandered in, this is not the session for you, I'm afraid. For the rest of you, hopefully this will be helpful. The plan is that I will talk for about 15 minutes, running through the process in general and covering a few key points about it. And then we're going to allow about 15 minutes or so to address your questions. There are, I think, 5 key points we want to cover. And the first key point is that the financial declaration process is about making sure that you are financially prepared for your studies. It is not, and I really cannot stress this enough, it is not a trick or a trap that is designed to prevent you succeeding in your admission and joining the university. It is an honest and open planning exercise, and it is designed to ensure that you are financially able to take on the commitment that comes with taking up your place. We can't hide from the fact that studying costs money. There's obviously course fees to be paid, of course, but there's also what you might call ancillary costs, but we lump them together under living costs. That's a fair amount of the information in the form that covers all of that, and that's why so much of the form is information we are giving to you rather than the other way around. We're trying to set out as clearly as possible our best understanding of what we think it's going to cost you. So that's both your course fees, your confirmed course fees for the first year of study, an estimate, realistic estimate of any course fees for subsequent years. If you're joining a program that runs to 2 or more years, we've provided estimates from the university there, and then a sense of living costs. Now this is the bit which can trip people up. Obviously, the university uses the information that it is best able to use, and the best information that's available is for full-time students living in single occupancy accommodation in the city. Obviously, as a college with a very diverse intake that covers not only part-time students but also students who may have family, dependents and so on, we're aware that those estimates might not be the most helpful. So you should take them, if you like, as a starting point for planning, and you might find that if you don't neatly fit in to the single student living in single occupancy accommodation in Oxford model, that you need to make up your own mind about what costs there will be and come up with a realistic plan. And this might be higher, it could be lower, depending on your circumstances. Now you should complete the declaration with the plan to meet those overall costs in mind. Now we don't ask you for evidence of all of that plan, but you do need to have that plan in place. And by doing so, the hope is that you won't get into financial difficulty once you've enrolled and be prevented from getting to the end of your studies and hopefully earning the degree that you deserve. And that's why the declaration part, the actual bit where you sign, has language in it that talks about all of these costs. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 is that you do not need to meet the financial condition before you accept the offer from the college. It's perfectly proper to accept the offer and its terms, including this financial condition, and then work towards meeting them. Actually, the admission system as a whole assumes that's how things are going to work, since we can't actually do anything with your financial declaration until we've recorded your acceptance of the offer. So if you're in the very lucky position of being able to make the declaration straight away, and you haven't already accepted the offer, then yes, by all means, write to us saying, I accept the offer and here's my financial declaration. But if you are not in that position, and there are lots of people that would be the case for, then do please accept the offer as soon as you can, once you've had time to digest it, of course, and then work towards meeting the financial condition. So there's that to bear in mind. Now, the third key point is that the financial declaration process does not commit you to pay fees. And this comes up every year, and we have applicants who hesitate to make their financial declaration because they're worried that doing so will mean that we'll want them to pay their fees even if their plans change so that they don't actually come to the university. It's understandable concern, especially with all the uncertainties we've had in the last year or so. But I'm very happy to say that it is an entirely baseless concern. We cannot charge you anything in terms of course fees and so on if you don't enrol. So if you meet the financial condition in the next few weeks, and then say you get towards the end of August or early September and something changes and you decide that coming as planned is not what's going to happen for whatever reason, whether that's changing circumstances out of your control or your free choice, you decide that there's a different way you want to approach things, and you withdraw from admission, then you won't incur liability for course fees, and you won't see an invoice landing in your inbox, or you shouldn't, as long as we've been told that you've withdrawn. If the timing works out such the invoice is on its way before you've withdrawn, then we'll sort it out. Now, it should be noted that there are some circumstances in which withdrawing can still incur a cost. It won't be course fees, but it might be that you've paid a deposit, either to secure a place on the programme, which is fairly common now, or if you've paid a deposit towards your accommodation and so on. And that's quite separate from the financial declaration process and for the fees process as well. And so it'll be handled by the relevant party. So, for example, if you paid a deposit for college accommodation, then it will be handled by our accommodation office. The nature of deposits does mean that usually it won't be refunded, I'm afraid, but there may be some exceptions there. So that's that. And then point number 4 is to say that this is not an instant pass or fail assessment. We certainly do assess declarations as quickly as we can, and our boss, who tends to be the person who assesses these things, the academic administrator, is very quick to make decisions. But we don't go, you have one chance at this, and if you make a mess of it, make a mistake somewhere, that's it, you're out. No, that's not how it works at all. What will happen is we will look at your declaration. If we're able to accept it as is, then we will do so. And if we are not, then what we will do is we will put it into a pending pile, and one of us, usually my colleague Rob, will write to you and say, hello, thanks for submitting the declaration. We're not able to accept it at the moment, and here's why. And more importantly, here's how to address whatever that concern or issue might be. So, for example, if you've said, I've got this funding package and you've missed out one of the letters, then we'll just say, we're missing this letter, please provide it, and then we'll take another look. And we will allow time for that. And one of the things I think is helpful to know is that we're happy to continue to work with you in this sort of way, so long as we can, and as long as you stay engaged with us. So as long as you're responding to our messages and giving us honest answers to questions and so on, and we have the time available to do so, obviously there comes a point in the admission cycle where it gets very near to the start of term and we have to draw a line under things. But as long as we can, we will keep things going so that you have the maximum chance of meeting this condition and being able to proceed. Now, final key point, and then I'm going to talk about deadlines. The final key point is evidence. Now, obviously, you'll have read in the documentation that there's evidence required, and you've seen that that evidence only relates to the course fees for year one. So if you're joining a program that is, say, a part-time doctorate with 6 years of fee liability, we're not asking you to provide evidence of 6 years worth of fees. We're just asking you to show evidence of year one and taking it as part of your declaration that you have a plan for everything else. Evidence varies, and the university writes about these things in very stark terms and is quite specific about certain things, but actually it's down to the colleges individually to decide what evidence we'll accept. And we take a very common sense and light touch approach. All we're looking for is something that clearly shows that the money is available and that you have the disposal of it. That's fairly straightforward. In most cases. One thing to bear in mind is that the university paperwork often says that bank statements are only acceptable as a last resort, if that. At Kellogg, we realise that the sort of funding letter from a bank or an accountant or a lawyer that the university talks about is not the sort of thing that a lot of applicants have available. So we're quite happy to accept bank statements. We want it to be light touch, so the top page that just summarises the total, the opening balance, the total in, the total out, and the closing balance, and shows who owns the account will be perfectly acceptable in most cases. We certainly don't want the data protection nightmare that is having all of your transactions for a month sitting in our account in our data management system. And we just need a statement that's recent. So we say a statement for 1 month, and as long as it's been within the last 3, that is usually fine. There are some other scenarios that are worth bearing in mind. Obviously, paper bank statements aren't always available, and you might be using an online portal. Not all online portals provide everything that we need in one go. Certainly, if you're on an app, on a mobile app, it'll usually just show your current balance, and that's nice, but it doesn't tell us who owns it and so on. So you may need to log on a computer, go to the full version of the portal and download a PDF statement to provide it with us. If you're paying course fees from income from work, and this could apply to part-time applicants paying for themselves, or maybe for full-time applicants who are being supported by a family member, then what we prefer to have is a short letter from an employer confirming the income level and the expected duration of employment. Pay slips, tax statements, and so on. Those are okay if we can't get something else, but obviously they pose, again, something of a data protection nightmare, so we'd rather not have them. Obviously, if you're self-employed, it'll be different arrangements, and generally something from an accountant. Your accountant is the way to go. Speaking of third-party funding, there's 2 kinds. There's public and there's private third parties, is how I tend to think of it. Public third parties are funding bodies, research councils, maybe the university itself. For those funders, it's usually scholarships, bursaries, that sort of thing. And what we're looking for is a confirmed award letter that sets out the nature of the award and the terms it's being made on. And it should really come on headed paper, obviously in digital format, not printed, and be signed digitally by a relevant official. Private third parties, that's usually family members or friends who might be chipping in money to help you, or covering the entire cost if they're able to. Then what will happen is they'll need to provide 2 kinds of evidence. Evidence of their ability to pay, which might be something like a letter from an employer or a savings account statement, something like that, and evidence of their willingness to pay. The latter is usually dealt with by a short letter of consent that says, I agree that I'm going to commit the funds shown in whatever the evidence is to paying these fees. That comes up, common scenario that comes up in is where someone is paying for fees out of an account that's held jointly with a spouse or partner. We will usually need a letter of consent from the other account owner confirming that they're willing for the money to be used in that way, as it is jointly theirs. So that's it for the key points. A word about deadlines. There is a single deadline, the 23rd of July, that we set regardless of when offers are being made. The idea is to give the maximum amount of time possible for working towards this condition. The flip side to that is that that does limit our scope for leniency and flexibility after the deadline, but we will do our best. So what will happen is the 23rd will roll around. Many of you won't be able to make your declaration much before then, so we will have quite a large pile to work through. Once we have done so, we will contact everyone we haven't heard from and say, hello, we haven't heard from you. Could you tell us what's going on, and give you a fairly short time to respond. As long as you respond and explain your situation clearly, we'll do what we can to be accommodating. So it might be you're waiting on confirmation of funding that you've applied for, and that's not going to be known until, say, the second week of August, in which case we will say, fine, we'll give you to the second week of August to get us that information. Worth bearing in mind, if you submit your declaration on the day of the deadline, we'll obviously treat it as having been received by that date, and we'll backdate our acceptance of it accordingly. But please, if you are in a position to do so, please do submit your declaration ahead of the deadline. It makes our lives a bit simpler. Our inbox doesn't get quite so crazy, and it also gives us more time to work with you on any issues that might arise. So if you are in a position to do so either now or in the next few weeks, please do submit your declaration in advance of the deadline. Now, I think at this point, I'll invite people to start putting questions if they have any in the chat. And I'll just highlight, because it occurs to me that some of you may be, well, some of you are going to be full-time applicants, that there is an earlier deadline for those of you who are seeking college accommodation, and that is the 30th of June, so about a month ahead of the main deadline, and that's for entry into the first accommodation ballot to request a room. If you're looking to get full-time accommodation, then you need to bear that in mind. Right, I'm going to stop talking and hand over to Emma, and we'll see if there are questions to answer.
Do we have any information when the government masters loans will go live? I don't believe that would be something we're aware of, but I wonder if Christopher knows roughly sort of in past years when they have.
So if we're referring to the government-backed loans, so the postgraduate master's loan and the doctoral loan schemes that you can get through the different national awards bodies, so Student Finance England, Wales, Northern Ireland, and the Scottish Awards Agency, they usually open to applications much later in the summer than is ideal for this process. We have a separate way of dealing with this. Because of the way we look at this. The loans have such a very tiny failure rate that we're quite happy for people to write in their declaration, I am going to apply for this loan when I am able to, and we will accept that. On the tiny proviso that once you have got confirmation of the loan, that you pass that along to us. I can't remember the exact opening date, and I think it may vary depending on which nation you're applying from within. I would suggest just checking gov.uk should have that information.
You do only have to provide evidence on the course fees, the living costs for your information. I think my colleague Rob has answered that in the chat as well. In regards to the submission deadline for those for accommodation, it's the 30th of June, Christopher?
Yes, it is. 30th of June, that's for the first ballot. So the way accommodation works, and if you would like to learn more, we have a Q&A session about that coming up later this month, which details have been circulated for. Yes, so the way it works is that there's a first ballot to allocate rooms, and to be in that you have to have made your request online and you have to have met the financial condition by the 30th of June. We obviously do a certain amount of liaison work with the accommodation office about that, and our objective is to get as many people in the first ballot as we can because it gives more time to get this sorted out. So yes, if you would like, this is for long-term accommodation for full-time students. If that's something you're interested in securing through the college, then 30th of June is the date to work towards.
The accommodation session we're running is at noon on the 21st of June with our lovely accommodation manager. There has been info sent, as Christopher said, but if you are interested and you can't find it, if you email admissions@kellogg.ox.ac.uk, they'd be happy to provide you the booking information.
I am hoping to put it in this week's update email to offer holders as well.
There you go. You can just wait a few more days and there'll be more information for you coming. In regards to feedback on the financial declaration, if it's near the end of the deadlines, then it does take longer. But if I can ask Rob, because Rob probably knows how long it takes you usually from when you send it in to when you get an answer.
It can vary a little bit, but we like to promise that we will probably have feedback about within a week. If you haven't had it within a week, it might be worth chasing us up. Especially as we get closer to the deadline, I think more of my day is going to be dealing with financial declarations. But yes.
Thanks. So Rob will put the admissions email in the chat in a second. As you said, nearer the deadline, it might be slightly longer, but a week if it's in general. Okay. If you plan on applying for multiple scholarships with varying results deadlines, some that may occur after August, will these scholarships be included in the declaration? So before the financial declaration, do include any letters. If you get funding after you've submitted your financial declaration, you should let us know and resubmit the evidence so that we know who your new funding body is. This is obviously so that when the invoice comes in, we know, our finance team know who they should be charging. So if you think there's one coming in just after the deadline, it may be that you can work with college on the deadline. You'd have to email admissions to sort of discuss the routes. But yeah, if you submit a financial declaration and subsequently you're awarded funding, which is brilliant, then you should get in touch to redo your declaration so that we have the most up-to-date information.
Could I take a DT's question? Does one need to submit the financial declaration before one applies for accommodation? I believe you can make the application, but we need to have your financial condition completed before the actual ballot itself. So the deadline for that will be the 30th of June, I believe.
It can be a scanned copy of the bank statement, yes. I think at the moment that is all the questions we've had. In which case, great. I hope we have answered all your questions for you. Rob has put the admissions email into Kellogg, into the chat if you need it. So do get in touch with us if you have any questions that you can't think about now but might crop up as soon as you log off. And in the meantime, we look forward to hopefully seeing you at future events like this, whether it's the accommodation one or we'll be doing some more over the summer as you move to freshers as well. There is one last question. I think this will be a Rob or Christopher. How you put in the exchange rate?
So generally in the past, what we've had is someone has taken a screenshot of, like, they've literally looked up the exchange rate online and taken a screenshot of the exchange rate from whichever relevant currency to British pound sterling, and that's worked in the past.
Yeah, and as it happens, I had to cover for a while last summer assessing these, which was interesting, and I learned the valuable lesson that our boss actually checks just to make sure there hasn't been a dramatic fluctuation between when you submitted your declaration and when it's assessed. the speed at which we work, it's generally not a problem, but it's something that a due diligence thing that we do.
So thank you, Christopher and Rob, and thank you everyone for attending. We look forward to welcoming you to Kellogg soon.